We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insight, new style, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Monday, March 24th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and welcome to a brand new week of News Generation. Joining us today is Ki Kim.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Good morning. And Cheska Dain-ho.
Happy Monday morning, everyone!
Good morning. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Monday means it's time to start the week with issues concerning young people. And we talked about this topic, this curious contradiction, a few weeks ago. That is, young people who are arguably the most active social media users are also the most skeptical about it as a reliable source of information. So today here on NewsGen, we're going to look more deeply into this paradox. So starting off, I want to ask our panelists, where do you get your news or information?
So, well, I think it comes from my job, but I'll try to watch all sorts, starting with the traditional outlets first to the most famous news outlets, news channels in Korea, 3 major TV channels and other media outlets based on major newspapers. I go on Korean version of Google, actual Google, and if it's the news from around the globe, I look for all different foreign channels, New York Times, CNN, US News, The Guardian, Reuters, AP News, you name it. Even Le Monde, Asahi Shimbun. And if it's a big one, I just have to look for every outlet out there to make sure I get the fact right and see how each media is portraying it and how they are describing it.
So you're leaning towards more traditional news outlets, should I say,
Yes.
Ki? All right, then what about you, Cheska?
I don't have as diverse selection of sources as Ki does, but the major sources that he listed definitely are on the top of my list. So what I try to do is if I have a news article or something that kind of catches my attention, I try to check to as many reliable and major sources as possible.
So that you can compare and fact check?
Exactly. I think because consistency in news reporting is really, really important. And sometimes each media outlet takes a different angle or maybe interpretation. So I try to draw my own conclusion based on how each media outlet sort of portrays those incidents or news. And the other thing that I do is because I ride a cab very often, they sometimes have those little monitors.
Right.
Yeah, with TVs and radios. So I do listen to them quite frequently, but most of the time I try to practice like intentional searching and intentional news sort of search and then accept the information. Yeah, sort of do the screening myself. Yeah.
And what I found really interesting after listening to your answers is that you guys are both active on social media, but you are turning to traditional news organizations to find and obtain information and news.
Yes.
Which brings us to our main discussion today. So for anyone who might have missed our earlier episode, our keyword news discussion on this social media distrust paradox, we're going to recap what the numbers say. So Ki, could you remind us the latest data on how millennials and Gen Z view social media as a news outlet?
Sure. So if you take a look at the screen right now, according to the Korea Press Foundation, the survey showed that millennials and Gen Zs did not trust social media when hot issues rose on the surface. So as you can see, it accounted for 30%, followed by online video platforms such as YouTube or TikTok, accounting for 16%, and 10% of them did not believe online communities, including blogs, cafes, small online communities for specific groups and all. Younger generations are known for learning the latest news from social media and YouTube, that there is now even saying that now TikTok reports the news. But in reality, and ironically enough, like you mentioned before, they don't actually trust the source.
That is very interesting. Then Cheska, what does this poll and survey illustrate about other generations?
So for, baby boomers and Generation X, the least trusted source was the online platform, followed by the general cable channels. For social media, it was only about 10%, but my own interpretation is that because these generation don't really use social media that often to begin with.
As much as millennials and Gen Z.
Exactly. So their life doesn't circle around social media. They don't even access social media that often. So I think they wouldn't even consider accessing news through social media. So perhaps that reflects the low percentage as well.
Right. So to sum up this poll once again, millennials and Gen Zs are calling social media the least trustworthy source for news and information. And I think that raises this question, then where are they turning to for information and news instead?
Well, we've we've talked about this on News Generation before in our previous episodes. So MZers don't sit down in front of TV to watch or sit on the desk to read the newspaper in their hands to learn about the latest news or get information what they want. So going back to the survey we talked about earlier, one of the most trusted sources was, as a matter of fact, traditional newspapers. But only 3% in their 20s and 8% in their 30s actually read them. They think it takes too much time, and it's just that they're not used to reading or watching news anymore. Even if you take a look at the dramas or movies back in the 90s or early 2000s, you could see many scenes where fathers are watching the news at night after dinner, or reading a newspaper in the morning with a cup of tea or coffee, or you could see many gentlemen reading newspapers on a bus or in a subway, but you don't see that anymore. All you see is maybe people looking at the smartphone screen to read the news, and some of them are not necessarily from the major sources or well-trusted sources.
Then Jessica, I want to ask you, despite this low confidence and trust towards news that is being provided by social media platforms, why do you think that our generation is keep on scrolling to find news and watch them?
That's such an important question. I mean, I think first of all, our life circles literally around social media.
Right.
It's too closely connected. Eugene, you mentioned both Ki and I, we work in journalism, and I think everyone, we sort of need to reach out and connect with people. So social media almost becomes a part of a job. For other people, it becomes a part of their lifestyle. So when you log into social media, it's really easy to have these pop-ups or have these very catchy and sometimes vulgar wordings that are designed to catch people's attention and just sort of do a clickbait to sometimes spread falsified information. And sometimes I think even though we don't want to, because we have to access social media to continue our livelihood or to have access to certain information, it's really easy to get sidetracked, which also brings to the question of how do we practice media literacy and do intentional searching when it comes to this world, flooded with information and noise at the same time.
And we're going to talk about how to increase media literacy in the later part of the show. But before that, we also asked our viewers the same question, which is, where do you get your news? And we're going to take a look at 3 of the responses. Our first comment for this Monday is by Brown Giraffe 101. Social media platforms present trending issues in an engaging and accessible way, making it easy to consume information even when I'm not actively seeking it out. But I always cross-check important information with more reliable sources. Roddy Russell Jr. 93 says, I need to be entertained, so I get news about social issues from satire shows on TV. Matthew Lay 6504 says, it isn't a matter of the source of information, it's more important to be able to sort the wheat from the chaff. All right, thank you for all this comments. So we're now going to dig into the reason why with our panelists. What do you think is driving this growing distrust among younger generation towards social media sites and platforms when it comes to obtaining news or information?
Right, many social media channels nowadays put up thumbnails or headlines that are very provocative just to lure more visitors and get more hits and views. And once you click and look inside, they miss the important point. Short-form type of media isn't just enough to contain all the necessary information, and there are some missing pieces which makes viewers or readers fall for a lack of judgment, or sometimes it could even make some significant issue look like a joke. And surprisingly, there are so many fake news frauds just to get that accumulated hits and views, and clickbait news like some celebrities' death or crime, which has been a big issue in Korea lately as well. And there were even misinformation about disease or health. So some statistics tell fake news about alcohol or even about COVID back then made about 800 people died around the world.
So all of this really creates a big mess for the public to differentiate what's true or not. What could be some other factors, Cheska?
I think there are 2 factors when it comes to spreading information on social media or online channel that is different from the traditional. The first is the advertisement. So in the traditional channel, in order to put your ad up on there, the hurdle was really high. There was a lot of screening, the information had to be accurate, and also the finance hurdle to get your ad on a cable channel or TV was really, really high. Now with so many online channels, the hurdle not only became low, but also the standard for how you create the ad became extremely low. So I think all of us have had that experience when we're trying to search something and then we get this annoying pop-up.
Yeah, sometimes we can't even tell what's an advertisement and what's news or information.
Exactly. There's sponsored news or sponsored information that comes up, and then somehow they so accurately track your algorithm, so they give you the right information that you just searched about. So you get hooked, or you want to click and then find out more about it. And I think that's one of the ways that has spread falsified information. The other is, as Key mentioned, nowadays, anyone can post news online. So if I want to spread, malicious information about a person or a celebrity, or I want to raise some concerns about a disease, I can, quickly do some video edits, or I can write an article and just post it up.
And if you add the right hashtags.
Exactly. And then somehow it becomes viral, or it tracks the algorithm, then boom, you get hits and millions of views, and people get high from it because people are watching this, people are reacting from it. So I think it creates a cycle of people wanting to continue creating that falsified information.
Definitely. So to find out whether the skepticism is a global trend, after the break, we'll speak with a journalist based in Japan to learn how things are playing out there. We'll be right back.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
Welcome back. Joining us this Monday is Walter Sim, Japan correspondent for The Straits Times. Welcome back to the show, Walter.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So Walter, starting off, traditional media such as newspapers and TV news still seem to dominate in Japan. So how do you think they've managed to hold on to that trust and influence?
I think that's a very interesting question, and I suppose it really comes down to several reasons. So firstly, they are all legacy titles that have existed for decades and thus still benefit from this image of trust that has been cultivated over generations. But also, there is this Kisha club or press club system in Japan that is really quite exclusive to for traditional media, and it kind of excludes freelancers and other reporters. So this kind of gives traditional media the extra edge in terms of access to, say, government press conferences and senior officials, and thus adds more credibility to what they report. Thirdly, traditional media has also been relied on as a source of news breaks to break stories for scoops, although this often relies on leaks, maybe from, say, liberal politicians who leak to to liberal newspapers when they are unhappy with what their conservative counterparts are doing, or vice versa. And we also get leaks of crime stories from reporters in the police press club, for instance, from investigators who kind of divulge information that is not already out there. And fourthly, I also believe that the story is pretty much similar to South Korea, and there were very interesting statistics mentioned in the show earlier. It has been established that in South Korea, those who are older tend to use traditional media more. And I think the story is very similar here in Japan as well. And while this is not to say that the young do not watch or read news at all, but there is a naturally large mass media market in Japan. Looking at its demographics, it has 124 million people, of whom about 30% are aged 65 and above. So demographically speaking, the market is there. But I must also add that this trust and influence are obviously not enough to give Japan immunity from global trends in how viewership and readership have been on a steep decline. And some industry insiders have said that the media industry is entering an ice age if it isn't already in one.
Thank you for your insights and latest updates in Japan, Walter. And we're now seeing the rise of digital news platforms across the globe. And what do you think is fueling their popularity, and what are their strengths and weaknesses?
Well, as we've also heard earlier, I think the story is very much similar in Japan. It kind of coincides with the rapid rise of social media as a tool to spread news, and including from purely digital news platforms, but also increasingly from traditional outlets that have a larger and growing online presence. So this, I think, boils down to what has often been referred to as the attention economy. So people's attention is being treated as a very valuable, a very scarce resource that businesses, platforms, etc. have to compete and vie to obtain and maintain. And yet people increasingly do not have the time or the patience to sit down over breakfast, to pore over their print newspapers, or even watch the 7 p.m. news at night over dinner. So even though traditional media outlets increasingly recognize the need to engage with readers or viewers online, and some of them are spending a lot of very commendable effort to help viewers make sense of important stories, whether through bite-sized digests, TikTok video commentaries, or even listicles. This kind of gives digital news platforms a run for their money, but yet I still think that the strengths of these newer outlets lie in how they are obviously more talented in entertaining and informing their readers or viewers at the same time, even though their weakness, I think their largest weakness still remains their credibility. They have far less access to newsmakers than traditional media outlets, and there also seems to be a lot less pressure on these newer outlets to get the news right.
You know, Walter, as you mentioned, there's a lot less pressure on these new media outlets, which could propagate more falsified news and, misinformation. So as users of social media and this overflowing of information, what practical steps can we take to practice media literacy?
One very practical step, and I think the most practical step, as we have heard earlier as well, is for people to read as widely as possible from different sources of news, be it newspapers or be it online media platforms as well. They could also listen to podcasts, which is increasingly popular, or watch news videos, be it on television, on YouTube, on TikTok, whatever. But this unfortunately also requires a lot more work and requires a lot more time that people do not necessarily have. So whether they are committed enough to read as widely as possible, or to listen or watch as widely as possible on their commutes is another thing. But ultimately, I think the unfortunate state of affairs is that media literacy generally has been on the decline. And I think governments and traditional media outlets have the responsibility to play to kind of make the news more interesting, more palatable, so as to engage readers and viewers even more, so that they would be more interested inherently in the news. It's very unfortunate, and I won't name names, that some politicians seem to be weaponizing, fake news and misinformation by spreading it themselves. And also very unfortunate that fake news, by its nature, tends to be a lot more dramatic than real news, which might be a little bit boring, for lack of better word. And the scary thing is that even social media outlets like X and Meta, on top of amplifying what people and their friends already believe by their algorithms, they are also stepping away from their role of social media fact-checking now. So I think this is something where traditional outlets must and should exercise even more responsibility to help fact-check the news for the people, and as well as, very importantly, make the news more accessible, more palatable, more informative, more entertaining for people. And on top of that, I think they can also look at, publishing commentaries, or opinion pieces written by trusted thought leaders, so that the readers and viewers can, get more access to what people in the know are saying. Yep. So I think this kind of exposes viewers and readers to a lot more different opinions, and I think this would be best and a very practical step that people can take. Not just people, of course, but also traditional media outlets and governments as well.
Great advice for both news producers and consumers. All right, Walter, thank you so much for your time today, and hope you have a great week.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so based on what we've discussed today, ending off, we're going to try to untangle this trust paradox one last time. So we rely heavily on the internet and social media, younger generations, yet we're constantly questioning what we're seeing on those platforms. So what kind of news content do you think our generation actually wants?
Well, according to the latest research by the Northwestern University, the ideal news outlet Gen Z from the overseas want is when journalists genuinely know about the subject and acknowledge making a mistake if there's any, and it should be clean, and the credibility is pretty much everything. The younger generation nowadays don't like to spend time researching or looking into news. They just want to be informed, but one must realize that short format news will not have enough information. There will always be missing pieces. It's not going to reflect the entire body of the news. So if I may suggest, it may come from my occupational hazard. You may want to compare 2 or 3 different sources so you can get the right judgment from the enough information.
So as Walter mentioned, read and listen as widely as possible from various news outlets.
From a variety of different sources. Even if you don't like certain, there's always lefts and rights and black and whites, but you also have to listen to the side that you don't like, because there's always some information that they suggest that you did not know before. So you can get the correct judgment.
Right. What do you suggest, Jessica?
I think because we all work in journalism, I think we can all agree that when it comes to information, accuracy, credibility, but also freedom and diversity is really, really important.
Right.
Yeah, and recently in America, there was a lot of shutdown of media outlets, and diversity has been shrinking. And I think that's one of the ways that as users and as recipients of information, we feel like we're being taken advantage of something that was given to us. And I think in that sense, we want not only accurate information, but also wide selection of information so that we can choose and compare and learn and grow from each one of them, instead of being fed through like an algorithm or really catchy words just to become a clickbait of some advertisement company. So I think that is something, as an MZer, I would personally like to receive more accurate information, but from many different sources and many different angles. Yeah.
So free, diverse, accurate, transparent information.
It's like a logo.
Right. We have a lot to work on.
Exactly.
All right, and that's
But it is doable.
It is doable,
yes.
indeed. And stay tuned. And that's all we have for today, but we will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks to Kiken.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Jessica Arirang.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us, and stay tuned to all the exciting topics we have throughout the week. And we'll see you back here tomorrow. We are News Generation.